You're going there whether you agree or not. He stood near the living room doorway, arms folded, as if waiting for me to collapse, to cry, to beg, to fall apart in front of him. But I did nothing. I didn't step forward. I didn't speak. I only looked at him, and I wondered quietly if this was truly the person I had raised. The same child I fed when my body ached and broke. The one who used to grip my clothes in his sleep when nightmares came. When did blood grow so distant? I stayed silent not because I had nothing to say, but because if I opened my mouth, everything in me would pour out at once. He exhaled sharply, irritated by my quiet, and began listing reasons. He said he could no longer carry the responsibility, that I disrupted his life, that his wife was exhausted, that this wasn't a way for anyone to live. He spoke as if I were not a person, but an inconvenience, an unpaid debt, a forgotten object taking up space. He never raised his voice. That calm, measured tone hurt more than shouting ever could. And all I could think was, what did I do to deserve this? But no one knows how much a mother keeps buried in silence. I walked into the kitchen as though everything were normal. I filled the kettle and made coffee. My hands trembled not from fear, but from the strength it took not to break. I sat at the table and took a slow sip. From the next room, I heard him on the phone. He said there was an opening at the facility, that he would handle everything, that it would be settled in 2 days. 2 days. That was all I was worth. That was all it took, 2 days to erase me. My fingers tightened around the edge of the mug as memories flooded in. Every year, every sacrifice, the meals I skipped so he could eat enough. The endless nights I stayed awake listening to his breathing, calming his asthma, chasing away his fears, shielding him from things he couldn't yet name. All of it, everything I had been, everything I had given, reduced to a decision made without my consent, without my voice. I had known this moment would come. Not like this, not spoken so plainly, but I felt it in the way Marcus had been looking at me for months, like my presence alone exhausted him. I saw it at the dinner table where conversation died before it began. In the way his bedroom door shut the second I passed by, in how his wife treated me like a visitor who had overstayed her welcome. But those words to days, that was the final strike. When he returned to the kitchen, my cup was empty. I asked softly if he wanted me to make dinner. He stared at me, confused. Perhaps he had expected tears, anger, a scene. Maybe he wanted to see me beg, but I was no longer that woman. I didn't cook. I didn't argue. I went to my room, closed the door gently, sat on the edge of the bed, and there at the very start of a long, sleepless night, made a decision. If choices were going to be made about my life, they would be made by me. Marcus doesn't know who I am. He doesn't know who I was or what it cost to become this version of myself. He forgets that I existed before I was his mother, that I was once strong, that I dreamed, that I danced in the rain, that I loved recklessly, lost deeply, and rebuilt myself more than once. He forgets that this house is not his, that I built it with my own hands. 30 years managing a small bakery, 6 days a week, 4 hours of sleep a night. Every paycheck went toward these walls, every brick, every window, every flower planted in the yard. I never asked for anything in return, not even gratitude. But memory becomes very selective when it's convenient. I didn't sleep that night. I lay staring at the ceiling, replaying my life in fragments. The first time I saw this empty plot, nothing but dirt and possibility. The day I carried Marcus home as a newborn, wrapped in a pale yellow blanket. The holidays, the laughter, beer arguments, the forgiveness. Everything lived inside these walls. And now he wanted to lock me away as if I were something broken. Something to be managed. I didn't cry, not because the pain wasn't there, but because my tears no longer belonged to him. At dawn, I rose before anyone else. I made breakfast the way I always had. Marcus came downstairs with that familiar expression, hurried, distant. He said he had errands to run, paperwork to handle, that we would talk later. I nodded when he left. I went to the closet. Not to pack clothes. Not yet. I was looking for something else, a small dark wooden box I had kept hidden for years. Inside were the things that truly mattered, my documents, the deed to the house, my will, and a modest sum of savings no one knew existed. Not much, but enough. There were letters to, photographs, newspaper clippings softened by time. I sat on the bed with the box resting on my knees. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I smiled. He thinks I'm fragile. He believes he can decide my fate for me. He has no idea what I've survived or what I'm capable of. I closed the box and slid it back into its place. I needed patience, control. Asterisk, it wasn't time to reveal anything yet. But the moment had come, the game had begun, and this time I would be the one moving the pieces. That evening, I pretended to be exhausted and went to bed early. From my room, I could hear Marcus speaking with his wife. They talked about the facility as if it were a pleasant getaway, mentioning the garden, the cleanliness, the atmosphere, as though they were reviewing a hotel, as though a mother were something to be stored neatly away. I pulled the blanket up to my chin, not to shield myself from the cold, but from the weight of their indifference. The thought of leaving no longer frightened me. What hurt was knowing they believed they could choose for me. They would learn otherwise. The coming week would change everything, and this time I would have the final word. I remember the day Marcus was born with perfect clarity. The sky itself seemed to pause, as if it sensed something momentous was arriving. The doctor told me he took a deep, powerful breath the instant he entered the world, crying as though he were already claiming it, and in naive, hopeful believed that breath meant strength, that it meant life, to never imagined it was a warning. From the time Marcus was little, he was a difficult child, not one who cried from hunger, but from desire. He wasn't content with what he had. He wanted what belonged to others, and I, blinded by the devotion of a first-time mother, bent myself into whatever shape was required to keep him satisfied. I worked extra hours running my alterations business so I could buy him the brand name sneakers every child on the block begged for. I went into debt to secure him a place at a private school, convinced it would protect him from bad influences and wrong paths. I swallowed exhaustion, fear, and sleepless nights just to give him a chance to rise. When his father, my husband Robert, died, Marcus was only 15. The loss shattered us both. But what wounded me most wasn't the grief itself. It was the way Marcus began to look at me afterward, as though I suddenly knew nothing, as though he, with his voice deepening and his body growing stronger, had become the man of the house and I was merely a presence, fading into the background. "Stop crying so much, Mum. He had to die of something," he said one night while I clutched Robert's pillow, still warm with memory. After that, everything shifted. He stopped asking my opinion. He left without saying where he was going. He spoke to me like an employee, an inconvenience, a weight he had to carry. And still, I defended him. "It's just adolescence," I told myself. Tease. He misses his father, so I kept cooking his favorite meals. I kept washing his clothes. I kept hoping that one day he would wrap his arms around me again, the way he did when he was small. That embrace never returned. The years passed. Marcus grew into a successful manor business executive with a respectable job in the city. He moved out. I stayed behind in the house Robert and I had built with our own hands. Brick by brick, when hope was still alive between us. Every corner of this place carries a story, a memory. A wound I believed that once Marcus had found his footing, he would come back not to live, but to visit, to sit with me, to drink coffee, to ask how I was doing. Instead, the phone calls grew rare. The messages stopped entirely. And when he did appear, it was always rushed. A quick greeting, a glance at his watch, then gone. But what hurt the most wasn't the distance, it was the way he looked at the house, not with nostalgia, not with gratitude, but like someone already deciding what would be theirs once the owner was gone. One day, without warning, he said, "Mum, you should start thinking about selling this place." And in that moment, I understood exactly how replaceable he believed I was. "The house is aging," he said. "You can't manage it on your own anymore. He spoke without meeting my eyes, as if the words carried no weight, as if he didn't know that this house was the last living piece of Robert I still had, of us, of myself. I didn't argue. I nodded quietly and poured him another cup of coffee. After that, the pressure began. Weekly calls. Mum, did you talk to the notary yet? Mum, I know someone interested in property investment. Mum, don't take this personally. It's for your own good, and every time I hung up the phone, it felt as though another layer of me was being stripped away like petals torn from a flower before it has time to bloom. I clung to my routines, my plants, my sewing, my walks through the neighborhood, but his ambition had already crept into every room. Every drawer I opened felt like preparation for erasure. Then one afternoon, while I was watering the rose bushes, I saw him arrive. The new car, the tailored suit, the expensive cologne, that hardened expression I barely recognized. Asterisk, I've already spoken to Attorney Sterling, he said. If you don't sign, I'll be forced to take other steps. This house will be mine, whether you like it or not. That was the moment something broke. Not in me, in him. Because as he spoke, I didn't cry. I didn't protest. I didn't raise my voice. I simply looked at him. And in that silence, I believe he understood for the first time that his control over me was gone, that the fragile woman he thought he knew no longer existed. That night, I locked myself in my room. I pulled out the ledger where I'd recorded every expense since Robert died. Marcus's education, repairs to the house. Every sacrifice I'd made every time I'd gone without so he could have more. Each number felt like a wound, each total, a betrayal. And somewhere in the early hours of morning, I realized something more painful than all the rest. My son didn't love me. He simply needed me gone so he could inherit. That was when I decided. He would receive nothing, not a wall, not a chair, not even a flower pot. The next morning, I went to the market as usual, but I walked differently, as if every step was part of a plan that had only just begun to take shape. I ran into Evelyn Reed, the retired notary. I greeted her and asked quietly, "Are you still handling estate matters?" She looked surprised, then nodded with respect. "For you, Thelma, of course." That was where my preparation truly began. I gathered documents, titles, receipts. I uncovered deeds, payment records, and even an old letter in which Robert had clearly stated that the house was mine unconditionally weeks past. Marcus didn't call good. I stayed silent too, because sometimes the most powerful rebellion is saying nothing at all. A month later, he returned, impatient, authoritative. "I've decided for you," he said. "You're going to the facility whether you want to or not." That was when I knew it. This wasn't just ambition anymore. It was contempt. And that was the final line. I came home that afternoon with my throat tight, like I'd swallowed a stone I couldn't dislodge. The air felt heavier, not new, but undeniable. His contempt was everywhere, in the dirty plates left on the table, in the sharp edge of his voice, in the way he avoided my eyes, as if I were just another piece of furniture. That night was different. No shouting, no slammed doors, no insults. Worse. He sat across from me in the dining room while I finished serving dinner. He watched me calmly, coldly. "I've already spoken to Mr. Dawson," he said, slicing his meat without looking up. "Everything's ready. The house will be transferred to my name. You're going to the facility." I didn't respond. I placed my napkin on my lap with the same slow precision as always. Inside, something shrank, not fear exactly, but resolved taking shape. That night, I didn't sleep. I walked the hallway back and forth as shadows stretched across the walls, as if the house itself were watching. When did this happen? When did my son become someone capable of treating his mother like a nuisance? Questions were no longer enough. The next day, I did something I hadn't done in years. I wrote dates, names, facts. I remembered the original deed, locked away in the box in my closet. And then something else struck me. I hadn't signed anything legally. The house was still mine, and if he thought I would surrender it quietly, he didn't know me at all. I began carefully. I sold antique silver inherited from my mother, then jewelry that had been untouched for decades. Quietly, carefully. Marcus believed I was still obedient, still invisible. He was wrong. The day before his next visit with the attorney, I overheard him speaking on the patio. "Yeah, it's all set," he said. "The old lady doesn't say a word. Just cooks and wanders around like a ghost. We'll sign next week. Haim tearing out the whole kitchen. The old lady, not Mum, not my mother. Just the old lady." That was it. The next morning, I went to the bank. I opened a new account under a different name. I changed passwords, made copies, stored documents in multiple places. I reread the house deed line by line, and there it was, a clause I'd forgotten. One that allowed me to void any transfer if I could prove coercion or abuse. I guarded that page like treasure. The humiliations continued. Marcus never tired. Sometimes he ignored me completely. Other times he dropped grocery bags onto the table like commands. One night, I cooked his favorite meals, mothered pork chops and rice. I thought foolishly that maybe taste could awaken memory. He tried it once. "This is bland," he said, "just like you." What froze me wasn't the insult, it was the absence of emotion. As if I no longer existed at all. That was when I knew I couldn't do this alone. thought of Serena Hayes, the neighbor down the street. The woman who had cared for her own mother until the very end. The one who had offered help more than once when she saw me struggling. I went to her house with my heart pounding. When she opened the door, apron dusted with flour, I said simply, "I need to talk, and I don't know who else to turn to." She let me in without a single question. In her kitchen, smelling of fresh bread. I told her everything. She listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't minimize. When I finished, she took my hand and said quietly, "You're not alone. And you don't owe your life to someone who refuses to value it." That day, something inside me shifted. I went home changed. I no longer walked bent forward. Shoulders collapsed under invisible weight. For the first time in years, I carried myself differently upright, deliberate. I had a plan. A real one. Mine. Marcus noticed. He studied me with narrowed eyes, suspicion flickering across his face, as if he sensed a shift but couldn't name it. He said nothing. Just frowned and returned to his phone. I smiled to myself. His time was running out. Mine was only beginning. Serena kept her promise. She didn't disappear after that first conversation. She began coming by often quietly, carefully, as if she understood that even a whisper in this house could explode. Sometimes she brought fresh bread. Sometimes she simply sat beside me on the patio, watching leaves fall, saying very little. Her presence was gentle, undemanding, a relief in a place thick with tension. One afternoon, as we prepared strong black coffee together, she looked at me with steady eyes and said something that startled me. "Thelma, if you decide to leave, I'll help you go anywhere. You don't have to tell me when. Just tell me that you will." I didn't answer right away. I watched the steam rise from the pot as if my thoughts were hidden in it. But inside, something caught fire. For the first time, I didn't just imagine escape. I imagined beginning again. That night, alone in my room, I opened the drawer where I kept my most important papers. I took out the deed and studied it for a long time. There it was. My name, printed clearly, Thelma Price. Everything was still intact. I had surrendered nothing, and I wouldn't. Began quietly preparing to disappear documents. Small amounts of cash withdrawn slowly, carefully, my birth certificate, bank records, an old gold chain that had belonged to my grandmother. I hid everything inside an empty cookie tin beneath a full straw lining. No one would ever look there. Meanwhile, I played my role. I set the table. I cooked. I spoke little. Marcus seemed distracted, consumed by calls, investments, renovation plans for a house that was not yet his. But then, I noticed something unsettling. He was watching me. He began entering my room without warning, claiming he needed a pen, asking about misplaced keys. He lingered too long. His eyes moved over drawers, shelves. He didn't know what he was looking for, but he was looking, so I became more careful. I memorized where everything was. I took photographs with my old phone in case something was moved. Every action had to be calculated, every word measured. That was when Serena offered something I hadn't considered. My cousin lives near Asheville, North Carolina, she said. She has a small place, quiet. She doesn't ask questions. You could start there. The name echoed in my mind. Asheville. It wasn't the location, it was the promise. A different air. A different version of me. And how would I get there? I asked softly. I'll drive you, she said without hesitation. That was when we knew the departure had to be precise, fast, flawless. One Friday morning, while Marcus attended his weekly meeting with Attorney Sterling, I would leave through the back door with one suitcase. Serena would be waiting at the corner, the car ready, the route planned, silence guaranteed. I focused on one final goal. Leave everything in order. The house would remain intact, clean, empty, an inheritance stripped of meaning. I had already begun selling things quietly. Gradually, nothing obvious, only what he wouldn't miss until he needed it. My mother's porcelain dinner set, inherited folk art, an oil painting that had hung in the hallway for decades. Each sale was a good buy, but freeing the money went into envelopes sewn into the lining of my purse. If all went well, I would be independent, no permission needed. No one owed anything, but Marcus grew restless. One afternoon he asked casually, "Have you been to the bank recently?" "No," I replied calmly. "I don't know," he said. "Something feels off. I just want to be sure you're not signing anything without telling me." The irony burned. "I don't handle those things anymore," I said. "You know that." He stared at me, searching. Then he said nothing. 2 days before my planned exit, everything nearly unraveled. As I returned papers to the hidden box, a receipt slipped from my hands. Marcus walked in at that exact moment. He picked it up. It was for the sale of an antique figurine. No name, but an address. "What's this?" he asked. "Old paperwork," I said. "Found it in a box." My heart thundered. He watched me for several long seconds. Then he placed the paper down and walked out. He didn't come home that night. Serena called me immediately. "We move sooner," she said. "No risks." The next day I packed one suitcase. I left a letter on the dining table beneath a vase. It wasn't sentimental, it was a declaration. I wrote that the house was not his, that I had signed nothing, that my silence was withdrawn. "What you destroyed here cannot be repaired with new walls," I wrote. "And when I'm gone, you will finally understand this. A mother's presence is worth more than any inheritance." I signed it simply. Thelma Price. No love. No apology. When Serena arrived, I didn't cry. I closed the door firmly. I didn't look back. The sky was heavy with clouds. But I felt warmth on my skin. Freedom. We drove in silence. The road stretched ahead, and for the first time in years, I didn't care where it led. Behind me was the house. Behind me was Marcus. Behind me was the woman who had endured too much. Silence filled the car, not empty. But understanding and back at the house, Marcus returned to his golden cage. He entered, talking on the phone, distracted. He didn't notice the letter at first, only the silence. Not habit, not absence, a void. He called my name once, twice, again nothing. The bedroom was empty, not disturbed. Not chaotic, simply hollow. He read the letter, standing. Confusion, anger, disbelief, then panic. He tore it apart, smashed the vase, screamed into empty air. You had no right. But I was gone. For the first time, fear found him not of loss, but of power slipping away. And this time, there was nothing he could do to stop it. The attorney raised an eyebrow. You can't, he said evenly. Legally, you have no rights at all. That was the moment Marcus finally understood. He hadn't just lost me. He had underestimated me. He began asking questions, probing neighbors, fishing for information, but no one offered him anything. He went to Serena's house and knocked until his knuckles hurt. No answer. He learned she had been gone for days as well. That knowledge didn't scare him. It enraged him. He started drinking, not loudly, not violently, not the way movies portray it. He drank quietly, alone, sitting in front of a television, tuned to channels he didn't watch. Bottles emptied without ceremony, but food lost its taste. Days lost their shape, and in that hollow routine, the house began to change. At first, it had been a trophy, his future reward. Now it felt like a cage. Walls that reminded him he didn't know how to cook. Rooms that echoed because no one lowered the volume for him. Drawers that no longer produced clean clothes. One morning, he woke up to dust coating the furniture. The refrigerator was empty. The coffee jar bare. The bathroom smelled stale. And then he cried. Not loudly, not theatrically. It was a low, tight sound, shameful, restrained because, for the first time in his life, Marcus felt something he had never imagined feeling. Abandonment. And that was the real reckoning, not the documents, not the money, not the letter, but my absence. The mother who had always been there even when he treated her with contempt, masked as jokes, commands, disguised as concern, cruelty, dressed up as care. I hadn't abandoned the house. I had abandoned the weight. I had released my executioner, and no matter how angry he became, no matter how loudly he shouted into empty rooms, he couldn't force me to return every night. As he locked the doors and turned off the lights, with the television speaking to no one, he understood a little more the final line of my letter. A mother's presence is worth more than any money, and that presence was no longer his. We arrived at the edge of the town as the sky turned deep orange. It wasn't charming. It wasn't impressive. It was quiet, and that was enough. Serena parked the car and looked at McGentle steady. She didn't rush me. She didn't speak. I stepped out slowly. My legs trembled not from weakness, but because every step was deliberate. Every movement was an act of defiance against years of emotional captivity. The small one-story house had no luxuries. No history either. No ghosts. The air smelled of old wood and fresh cleaning. The windows were open. The wind whispered through them. I crossed the threshold like someone stepping onto land after a long shipwreck. I sat in the single dining chair and let out a laugh, unexpected, almost hysterical. Serena handed me a glass of water and sat across from me. "You're here," she said, as if I'd crossed an ocean. "Yes," I replied, "I am Boo." I didn't sleep that night, not from discomfort, but because my body didn't yet understand silence without fear. No footsteps, no criticism, no tension. Just night. It was my first free night of insomnia. The days that followed were awkward. Learning to live without fear takes time. At the market, I scanned faces as if danger were hidden everywhere. Smiling felt foreign, not unwanted, just forgotten. Serena was patient. Sometimes she cooked. Sometimes she read quietly while I stared at nothing. Slowly, the house began to smell like coffee in the mornings. Plants bloomed. A neighbor named Martha brought bread. I smiled uncertainly. Serena squeezed my arm. "You're safe," she reminded me. One afternoon, watering plants on the patio, I realized I was humming. I didn't know the song, but it was mine. Something was returning, not happiness yet, but presence. I was finally living inside my own life. The nights were harder. Dreams where Marcus shouted. Memories of slammed plates. Words that cut and lingered. "You're a burden. Without me, you'd be nothing." They don't disappear easily, but every time I woke shaking. Serena was there sometimes with tea, sometimes with silence. She never asked me to heal faster. She let me be broken. One morning, I climbed, alone, to the town's lookout point. The sun was just rising. The earth smelled damp and alive. Step by step, I felt my body reclaim itself. From the top, I saw clearly Thelma Price was no longer the woman who asked permission to exist. She was someone who chose to leave where she wasn't loved. I thought about selling the house, about traveling, about living quietly, and I would because it was mine. For the first time, my body, my time, my choices belonged to me. The wind rose, strong and sudden, like a whisper. "You are exactly where you need to be." It wasn't revenge. It wasn't punishment. It was emotional justice. Marcus would learn if he chose that a mother is not eternal, that you cannot crush a heart and expect it to keep beating for you. I no longer beat for him, I beat for myself, back in that house. Marcus pretended it was temporary. He told himself I would return, but silence multiplied. Dust settled, cold crept in. The house rejected him because the soul of that home had been me, and I took it with me one afternoon. I bought an ivy plant at the market. I placed it by the window. I caught myself speaking to it. "You'll be fine here," I said. "I will too," that night. I dreamed of Marcus Dot, not the man he became, but the child he once was, crying, asking why I left. I woke with a tight chest, not guilt, but clarity. Some people don't lose love, they lose access to it. And I had finally closed the door. I woke from that dream carrying both guilt and relief. Because although I had left Marcus alone, the truth was that he had left me alone for years. The days passed, and news of his unraveling reached me in fragments. A mutual acquaintance, the husband of a neighbor who still spoke to him, told me Marcus had stopped going to work, that he stayed locked inside the house, irritable, snapping at anyone who dared mention my name, that he drank, that once they found him asleep on the couch, empty bottles scattered around him. The television still on playing a cooking show I used to watch every afternoon, without me. His arrogance began to collapse. There was no one left to blame, no one to command, no one to humiliate so he could feel larger. For the first time, Marcus had to sit with himself. And he didn't know how. Then the letter arrived, handwritten, no return address. But I recognized the handwriting instantly. It was an awkward attempt at apology, laced with pleas and manipulation disguised as concern. "I don't understand why you did it this way. We could have talked. I'm suffering too." Not a single line said I hurt you. Not once did he acknowledge the damage he had done. It wasn't remorse. It was bait. I tore the letter into small pieces, burned them in the sink, watched the ashes disappear into the air. For the first time in years, I felt relief. I didn't need his approval. I didn't need his forgiveness. He no longer had power over me, not even through words. The sale of the house moved forward. The real estate agent, kind man in his 50s, sassed me several times if I was sure. He reminded me it was valuable, that I could rent it, that I might want to return someday. But every time I considered it, the same image rose in my mind, me hunched in a corner, listening to Marcus shout as plates shattered, telling me no one lived for free. That house was no longer a home. It was a wound with a roof. I signed the papers without ceremony. Asked that the money be transferred to a new account, mine alone. Serena came with me to the bank. She didn't speak. She just held my hand. That quiet support gave me more strength than 1,000 speeches. With the money, I didn't plan to buy another house. I wanted to live, to travel, to dance, to swim without fear, to laugh without permission. And yes, I wanted Marcus to know the house was gone. That every tile, every door, every memory he thought he would inherit now belonged to someone else. They told me that when he found out, he went mad, that he rushed to the house, desperate to stop the sale, but it was already empty. The walls were freshly painted, the furniture gone. No trace of my life remained. Standing in the yard, he screamed my name like an angry child whose toy had been taken away. He called my phone. I had already changed my number. He sent emails. They never reached me. He searched for me like one searches for a ghost, and that is what I was to him now, a woman who had left, taking the air with her. One evening, Serena prepared a special dinner, shrimp and grits, warm bread, sweet wine. We toasted to what I had lost, to what I would never carry again, to what I had finally released. As she spoke about opening her embroidery workshop, I realized something important. Not everything broken is meant to hurt forever. Some cracks are simply paths for light. Marcus would keep looking for me, not because he loved me, but because he didn't know how to live without someone to dominate, and I would never be that person again. I had never felt air as light as I did that morning in Savannah, Georgia. I woke without panic, without weight in my chest, no voices demanding, no footsteps, no fear of opening my eyes. I opened the window and let the sun touch my face, soft, warm, like a new beginning. Serena had gone to the market early. She left a note on the table. I'm bringing buttermilk biscuits and good coffee. I promise. I smiled, not for the food, but for the kindness. After a lifetime of silence and commands, kindness is treasure. The days slowed as they must when healing begins. I learned to walk without rushing, to stand beneath trees, to look at the sky without checking the time. Serena taught me how to swim again, not in water, but in life. We cooked, we cried, but they were cleansing tears, not drowning ones. Not everything was easy. Old memories surfaced like buried thorns. Sometimes I woke with Marcus's name on my lips, anger, grief, habit tangled together. But I wasn't afraid of the memories anymore. I had chosen myself. One afternoon, Serena asked if I missed the house. I thought carefully. I missed the woman I had been there, the one who endured. But not the house. Bricks are not worth more than peace. I didn't regret selling it. I was free. Marcus called once more. I didn't answer. His voicemail was polite, cold, "Mother, we should talk." Everything was clear. He wanted money, control, reassurance that something still belonged to him. But I now slept with doors open, walked without looking back, and every time the wind played with my grey hair as I drank coffee on the terrace, I knew I was exactly where I belonged. One sunset, I wrote a letter. Not to send. To release myself. Marcus, you were not born bad. You were born mine, and that is what hurt most. I believed you would love me as fiercely as I protected you. But you did not. You treated me as furniture, as a burden. You tried to lock me away. I let go. We owe each other nothing. My debt was to myself and I have paid it. You will inherit nothing. But I leave you something heavier than money, the silence of a mother who left without resentment and without return. No wealth replaces a living mother. I am gone. Thelma buried the letter in the garden, not to hide it, but to lay down a life I no longer carried. Months later, I met other women like me, women who learned late how to say no. We drank tea, walked the shore, shared secrets. One of them told me, "You're brave." I laughed. "No," I said. "I'm just tired of not being I didn't become famous. I didn't build empires. I did something harder. I lived without guilt. I learned to dance alone, to eat slowly, to trust my voice, to sleep with a calm heart. At my age, that is a revolution. I no longer ask what might have been if Marcus had loved me differently. Love begged for becomes a prison today. I walk lightly. Today I am not afraid. I was a mother, but I am also a woman. And now I belong to myself.